Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And we're having the giggles before we even start this episode, which is kind of appropriate considering the subject matter. John and I are on a quest to make a faction focus for every single one of the factions that are being released with the new edition of Warhammer 40k here in 10th edition, and to cover all the indexes in a way that is sort of short and succinct and easy to get to grips with without a whole lot of cumbersome detail, which is, I would argue, an acting ethos of the faction we're covering today. Because, John, today we're talking about Space Wolves.
Space Wolves. Space Werewolves. Space Wolves. Space Vikings.
John, I would push back against it if you weren't so right. And it does make it a little difficult to argue with you when you're right. We like to start with flavor here on the channel because we think flavor really matters for a lot of players, for us included. But John kind of, if you only look at memes, hit the nail right on the head. They are Space Viking werewolves. But there is some interesting nuance in there that I think is worth pitching. So, like all Space Marines, Space Wolves are taken when they're young boys, or in the age of puberty, and then they're shoved full of extra organs and medicines and almost magical items to make them grow at an obscene rate to become monstrous killers. But the thing that makes the Space Wolves different is that they're more monstrous than some of the others, because they have a defect.
Yes.
Unfortunately. I mean, they inherited their gene seed from their Primarch, Leman Russ, who was always monstrous. He is, in the lore, a lot of the Primarchs, the people who are the dads of these factions, are oftentimes tied to a myth from, our real pop culture, and he is the boy raised by wolves, and he became wolfish. And now his sons are the same. What this means is that the Space Wolves are a little looser than a lot of the other Space Marine factions. Rather than being so regimented and hierarchical and trying to play everything close to the chest and dour and quiet, the Space Wolves are, they are Space Vikings. They like to drink, They like to fight, they like to party. Some of them even have relationships, and I'm not going to get into it too much, but
on the other
cool
side
dudes.
they also appeal more to humanity than other Space Marine chapters. There's more than once in the lore where Space Wolves will actively come to the defense of the regiments that the Astral Militarum regiments they fought alongside, just because they did. Not because it's beneficial to the strategy, just because I like that guy. We shot dudes together. Which is a very fun thing.
Well, I think that kind of speaks to the fact that they are looser. They're more human.
Right. They have more flaws than some other Space Marines.
They do. More physical flaws. But they, being that they maintain some of the human joys that, you would have when you were alive, drinking, partying, having a good time with your friends, it might help you to connect with humans a little more than if you are forever a disconnected, stoic space angel. And that does lead into their rules on the table. Not as well in all instances, but I think generally it gets across well. They're sort of wild, charging nature with these sort of keen senses who work as a pack to bring down large targets, led by these incredible heroes of Saga. And while they are very unique, they are also Space Marines. So, like everyone else, they get the same base faction rule that all Space Marine factions get at the release of the indexes.
Yeah, so Oath of Moment for Space Wolves, and what does it mean, right? Same thing as it was with Blood Angels, same thing as it was with Dark Angels, same thing as it was with regular Space Marines. Reroll hits and wounds against a thing that you get to target, right?
Your whole army. You get to choose it at the start of your turn.
Right. But where you really want to use it in Space Wolves is to trigger your detachment ability, which we'll get into that next. But whatever you were trying to aim to kill, the category, right? Monster, vehicle, hero, you want to pick that one that you're gunning for this turn. Preferably with your heroes, because your heroes get a lot of buffs and stuff when they're trying to fight and complete sagas. So you're going to want to pick your Oath of Moment very specifically here. And you might have to ask your opponent, hey, is that a vehicle? Is that a monster? What is that?
Yeah, because really it all, like, this army functions around their detachment rule, which is deeds worthy of saga. So much like the idea of these sagas that were sort of spoken word tales from back in the darker ages of human history, they maintain the same idea in their culture. That these truly legendary feats that happen on the battlefield can be kept alive in the hearts and songs of warriors for generations, if incredible enough. And when these things happen, the glory is almost infectious to the rest of the wolves around them. So on the field, their soldiers are always looking for a way to make a name for themselves. And deeds worthy of saga is the rule that lets you do it. So, there's a lot of words to it, but I'll try to break it down simply. You can see it on the screen. At the end of the battle round, you could select a saga to have completed if you did the prerequisite action. And they're all very straightforward. Mostly around killing stuff, but also taking an objective. So we'll just do one for an example. The Saga of the Beast Slayer. As you would expect, this saga is completed if one or more Adeptus Astartes characters from your army destroyed one or more enemy monsters or vehicles during the battle round. You know, if there's Saga of the Beast Slayer,
easy.
You gotta slay beasts. I mean, it's on the 10.
Yeah, you just gotta, like, go find Godzilla and beat him to death.
Yeah, if you could stab Godzilla and Mothra, please don't stab Mothra.
And Mothra, precious.
I love Mothra. So cute. But if you stab Mothra, at the end of the turn, you could select Saga of the Beast Slayer, and then your whole army gets the ability to have lethal hits on their melee weapon attacks. Whole army. And every turn, you get the chance to try to score another saga, which gives you another stacking buff to your whole army. So the more incredible feats your characters pull off, the more emboldened their warriors are, and that's how you really snowball your advantage and start to storm across the battlefield and cut the enemy apart.
Absolutely.
And they just sort of like whip themselves into a frenzy, and then they're off at it.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most flavorful detachment rules we've seen for Space Marines. Right?
It is, yeah. It's my favorite of the ones we've seen.
Yeah, being able to just be like, I'm going on a quest with my Viking hero dudes is awesome. Like, it feels that way. Like, it is amazing. I am so tempted by Space Wolves right now, but I can't. I'm not allowed at all.
I know.
I need to live vicariously through our friend, so.
Yeah, Corwood gets to enjoy it. But Oath of Moment, which lets you like pick a target and reroll hits and wounds. If you're trying to do Beast Slayer, I'm just saying, you pick a monster, you get them in there, you might get it off.
Yeah.
And that's really how they pair together. And, you know, there are a number of War Scrolls in here. Actually, there's more than I expected in here.
There's a lot.
So instead of going through every single one of them and howling about it forever, I think it is better if we just pick 2 of them that we think are... Don't you shake your head at me, John. Don't you shake your head at me. We have cameras now, John. I can see you. That was a good joke. But we're going to pick 2 that we think are representative of the faction as a whole, and kind of give you our elevator pitch. So, John, you only get to pick 1 of the werewolf Vikings. What do you pick?
He is my favorite character. He has been my favorite character in the Space Wolves. He is old, he is tired, he is in a box, and his name is Bjorn the Fell-Handed.
You've picked the Grumpy Stompy. Okay.
Yeah, he's a grumpy, stompy, old man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's in a dreadnought. He's a character dreadnought, which originally he was the only one who was a character dreadnought. He's awesome.
Now everyone else is aping his idea.
Yeah, and like, as a character, his lore is that Leman Russ, the Primarch, went off on his big adventure forever ago. And he left Bjorn the Fell-Handed, who's in a dreadnought now, and he is the last person to have seen Leman Russ that's still part of the Legion.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's this half-mad robot, death, coffin dude with like murder claws and like a cool gun.
Yeah, a dreadnought is made when a space marine is too old or too mangled in a battle, and they're about to die, and then someone says, maybe not, and then they shove them in a coffin, and that coffin is now a piloting suit, and now they control a big robot. And Bjorn has been in that robot for millennia.
Yeah, for a very long time. And what he does on the table is very cool. So you have a bunch of different weapon options for his gun.
Of course.
To kind of fit whichever you'd like. My personal favorite is the Hellfrost Cannon because it's awesome and that's a hell of a name. And he's got a really good melee weapon, just kind of punch stuff. Real good. He is good in shooting and good in combat, but that's not all he does, right? Also is very defensive. If someone tries to shoot at him, he halves the damage of every attack that goes after him.
Halves.
Not -1. Half. And he has a feel no pain on a 5-up. So he is very hard to kill. With a 2-up armor save, he doesn't need an involve. I'm telling you. He'll be alright. But what really, really hammers it home, and the reason why your opponent is going to try to kill him, is that once per battle, when your opponent tries to use a stratagem, you get to tell them, it's going to cost 1 more. Is it turn 1 and your opponent really needed to use that reroll stratagem to like get this strategy off? Well, you only have 1 command point. I'm going to make you pay another one, and now you failed. You can't.
That's painful. That's mean. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, and guess what? That stays until the end of the battle. It's not until the end of the round. So if you tell them turn 1, rerolls all cost you 2 command points. Someone just goes, oh man, I might not be able to afford a reroll for the rest of the game.
Oof.
He's a pain. Like, he's great. Even if you just start the game, use that right on the stratagem the first time I try to use it, and then you just shoot away the rest of the time. He's paid for it. He's great.
Yeah.
Old man did his job.
Especially depending. That's pretty good. And he murders on top of it. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
But who else murders on top of the things they regularly do in the Space Wolves, Joe?
So I was kind of split here, y'all. Like John and viewer, I'm very split because there's a lot of cool stuff in here. But in the end, I have to pick Thunderwolf Cavalry. They are Space Marine werewolves riding giant dire wolves. That's their horse.
Wolf.
Look, if you're gonna play Space Wolves, let's go ham. Let's just go ham. Let's just wolf everything. 3 wolf moon shirts for everybody. As you can see on the screen, they're pretty quick because they're on a freaking wolf. So they got a 10-inch move and a 6 toughness is pretty good. Their save's only a 3+, but you can play around with it a little bit. But what I really think makes them incredible, even without saga buffs, but with saga buffs, good lord, they are devastating. You can see they got that ability there, Ferocious Charge, and that means that whenever they make a charge until the end of the turn, they get to add +1 damage to their melee weapons damage characteristic for everything on the card. And all of their weapons do 1 damage. So if you charge, functionally, it's doubling your damage.
And you get extra attacks from your wolf, not just like the guy's swings.
Yes. The wolf also gets attacks. So that's 7 attacks going from 1 damage to 2 damage. You're doubling them. And that's without any other buffs from sagas or characters. In previous editions, these guys were like tank hunters, kinda. Now, I think their real job and their real strength is going to be sort of getting out on a flank and charging into an elite infantry unit in another faction and just munching them, turning them to kibble, and throwing them in the bin. They're so good at it. And having a sort of fast-moving threat like that, I think is very indicative of the Space Wolf strengths.
Yeah, I agree.
And if they can get that good charge and kill that unit outright, now they're in the hen house and they are off to the races.
Yeah, and they're tough to deal with. They're not something you can just be like, I'm going to shoot a little bit of stuff at it. No, you have to dedicate to dropping down those wolves.
At 3-up save and 4 wounds, I mean, that's just enough beef to where you can't kill them with incidental fire.
And you can give them 4-up involves, too. The shields.
If you want to. You got some options. I don't know how expensive it'll be, but it's certainly something that would make them hard as nails. And you put a character in it, boy howdy. But I think for us, the thing we want to leave with, though, is not just like a general pitch, but also some practical tips if this is an army that maybe is sort of speaking to you. If, you know, you also think werewolves are super, super cool.
Yeah, love werewolves.
Like, if you're into Werewolf the Apocalypse as your favorite game, hello, it's here. We want to give you a practical tip on how to play this faction. So, John, what's your go-to tip for Space Wolves?
My go-to tip is kind of wide, but it's have a strategy for what you're going to be able to take down turn 1, right? Like, build stuff into your list that you could use to get the sagas early. You want to alpha strike with this army, even if it means throwing an entire unit away. Even if it means like bringing something that you're going to shoot a couple of times and you're really just trying to like get all of it out in turn 1. You want to start that steamroll effect early. You want to snowball into the other turns. To do that, you need to drop something turn 1. You got to bring something that will let you do that. Maybe it's the flyer that lets you shoot stuff. Maybe it's just something that can scout up a little, like run and charge, advance, get into combat, and rip it to pieces. You want to try to get a saga turn 1 because that'll set you up for the rest of the game.
But unfortunately, though, you got to have a character to get the saga, so you might not be able to. Oddly, I'm in your boat. We didn't talk beforehand, but my note is, I think, is yours. I just took it a little further. Take every opportunity you can to look for opportunities to score a saga.
Yes.
Because this army is really about pressure. That's what Space Wolf's strength is applying pressure. And the way that you're going to do that here is by getting those saga buffs going and keeping them rolling. And you're going to use that to trade up and then push in hard.
It's just holler brawling roll of thunder. It's all right.
It is, but you gotta get the sagas up. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're weaker than usual because you haven't really like gotten your hackles up, so to speak, and really got into the mix.
And some of these data sheets are kind of designed with the idea that you're going to get sagas. Like some of them seem to be a little bit underpowered than you're probably used to if you're a returning Space Wolf player. It's because they're more powerful once they start getting going.
Yeah, even if you only get like 2 sagas on some of these. If you give stuff sustained hits and lethal hits, for example, on
pretty good
of these melee blenders, now they start looking pretty spicy very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's army-wide. So look for your opportunities, take them where you can, steamroll them, keep the pressure on. The pressure is how you win as Space Wolves. It'll make your opponent make mistakes, it'll let you take objectives, it'll let you trade up into stuff that they don't want you to. And if you do that, you can howl at the moon with all your friends because you're going to win the game. And if you want to keep on howling, we'd appreciate it if you'd share the video around a little bit. Or if we missed something, or you think we made a mistake and you'd like to hear us fix it, howl at us about that. Socials are below. 3 Moonwolf shirt people are allowed. Comments are also open. And we appreciate you. That's been all of our opinions. Bonafide. Kentucky Fried. We'll see you on the next one. John, you don't like my wolf puns today. You don't like I hear you not liking my wolf puns.
I'm indignant for the viewers.